welcome to Reaching for the Stars. India as a country has seen a lot of youngsters who want to go abroad to study, to make a career. In the early 2000s, we saw a brain drain which increased by a whopping 85%. But there are some people who buck the trend. Today we have with us a very special guest, Ajaita Shah, founder and CEO of Frontier Markets. She was born and brought up in New York in an Indian diamond family, but she decided to come back to India to work in the microfinance sector in tier 2, tier 3 markets. And then she set up Frontier Markets, which today is empowering thousands and thousands of women with livelihoods. Ajaita, it's great to have you on the show. A very warm welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Ratna. Really looking forward to connecting.
You were born and brought up in the New York. So what are some of the memories from growing up in those days in New York? And how do they continue to inspire you to do what you're doing right now as an entrepreneur?
So, Ratna, it's a very interesting question because I can tell you that when my parents moved to New York in the 1980s, we always say it was the Jaipur Jain jeweler transition to New York. So where, frankly, we built Little Jaipur of the 1980s in New York City. And what that meant was that I was very lucky to have a very flourishing cultural experience of really learning what it means to be Desi, what it means to be Jain, and also what it means to be a part of a Rajasthani culture, which was always about, Diwali parties, learning how to do Kathak, making chai, learning how to read and write, speak in Hindi, and also really constantly thinking about how you're supposed to be showing respect to elders and empathy. So I'm really grateful for growing up in that community because ultimately it was then nicely juxtapositioned with the American culture, which ultimately was Western thinking, which was independence, which was about global citizen thinking and design. So you can say clash of two worlds, but then getting the best of both to be able to start thinking about how my culture and my identity stays with me where I go. But I'm also now capable of thinking about who I am as a person, as a global leader. And that's really what I brought with me when I moved to India.
That's fantastic, creating a mini Rajasthan in New York. But this has always impressed me. Families who've been there for multiple generations, they are somehow more rooted to India and make sure that the kids are brought up with the right cultural values, especially if they've been brought up over there. So I think that speaks a lot. And you coming back to India for your colleague is kind of an extension of that. But Ajaita, what made you take that decision, from New York to Rajasthan? And that also not like a finance job in Mumbai where you're, walking into small offices, but you went and worked in microfinance in tier 2, tier 3 markets. What made you take that jump and how easy or difficult was that?
So growing up in the US, I think especially in the 80s and 90s was a very interesting time because we had humanitarian crises happening, we had genocides happening, and we also had Americans and the United Nations, system really working on wanting to address challenges of warfare, of poverty, of trauma. And I was a child that grew up and watched all of that. And at the same time, in the early 2000s, we experienced our own reality with 9/11 and then going to the Iraq War and Afghanistan. And if we start thinking about the different trends in my time growing up, it seemed nonsensical to take the education and take the cultural spirit that I have and apply it to a mundane job. I felt like we were all supposed to be responsible for giving back to community and society and making the world a better place. I think that's really where the motivation came from. In college, I was lucky to then experiment on how to do that or how not to do that. So I spent 4 years interning everywhere from Congress in the US to getting trained in mediation, conflict resolution in The Hague, to working in research, and ultimately stumbled onto microfinance because one of our alumni was Pierre Midyar, founder of the Midyar Network in the microfinance sector. And I was baffled and fascinated by it. And I ultimately also recognized that in order to truly give back, the one learning that you get from mediation conflict resolution is go where you understand the culture the best, go where people understand you the best, and go where you can actually align on interests to make better outcomes. And for me, that became India. Now, why rural India? Why microfinance? Was partially because I really did believe in wanting to create big impact. And I believed my role as a global citizen, and I wanted to get back into India. But also because it was the most amazing opportunity to understand the concept of social business, where here you had an industry of financial services, but with an intentionality of wanting to serve women and wanting to create impact and reaching the poorest of the poor. Nothing like getting a chance to know the other part of India that I never got a chance to understand, which is, of course, the masses. And I thought I would do it for 1 year. I was actually going to take a gap year and work in microfinance for a year. I promised my mom I would come back to America and become a lawyer. But that 1 year became 17 because of the experiences in itself. How difficult or easy it was, I think I was just 20 years old, excited about the idea of just getting exposed to everything and anything. So I think that my colleagues just really appreciated how humble I was about not knowing anything and wanting to just adjust. I've been a people's person. I knew the language, so I was able to connect quite quickly. I think I always was a shock factor for everyone because they'd hear my American accent, but then they'd hear me speak in Hindi, and then they'd be confused as to where I'm from, which became the tool and the opportunity to make everything work.
And that's a fantastic story. I think that's where, the whole rooting of your Indian culture helped you immediately, hit the ground running when it comes to India. Knowing Hindi, knowing what the people would actually look forward to. It's an amazing journey. And, setting up Frontier Markets, which is actually a social commerce platform, going into tier 2, tier 3 markets, understanding what the customer wants, and then, building a network of Sahelis that you built, which is 10,000 Sahelis strong right now. It's rural markets, and it's women, and it's social commerce, right? All three combinations, social commerce being very new, rural and women being a difficult combination to put together because it requires a lot of convincing for the women to come out of their houses and say that, we want to do this. How did you do that?
So I was lucky to not set up my company before I had a proper level of experience in the microfinance sector. I worked in the microfinance industry for about 7 or 8 years, but I was very proud to say I was working with pioneers. I was working with people like Shomit Ghosh, like Vijay Mahajan, Chandrasekhar Ghosh, and Vikram Akula, right? Pioneers of the microfinance sector, where my role in the sector was always to look at credit plus initiatives. How do we serve our customers more effectively by giving them other solutions beyond finance? So I launched a micro health insurance product for urban India. I launched the Nokia Airtel partnership for rural India. I also failed miserably in trying to bring in clean water in microfinance and energy in microfinance. But in that 7 years, I was the luckiest person to be able to travel across Andhra, Karnataka, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, Bihar, in these villages. And my job was only to just keep asking people what they wanted and understand their needs more effectively. And then think about delivering a solution that could be justice to what their challenges were. So that experience became a natural thing. I got very good at it. I was doing this in 5,000 plus villages. I've met millions and millions of rural women and families. And so for me, setting up Frontier Markets became a no-brainer because I wanted to build a company that truly was going to democratize the voice of the rural consumer and truly see them with the lens of dignity and not just bichare beneficiaries. That was one. And so the design of the entire model was about what will rural customers need? What they need is trust. Who best to trust than women? Women, the most trustworthy women are people in these villages because everyone knows each other quite well. Social influencers is who I like to call rural women. What rural women do best is they talk to people and they know everything about people. So I think when we were designing a social commerce concept, it said, well, work with the person who knows the most and can enter into anyone's household. The thing about working with rural women, Of course, challenging in the sense that rural women, unfortunately, aren't as digitally savvy. They aren't as educated. They aren't getting access to the kind of trainings and skills and market linkages that, let's say, a lot of other men get opportunities to get access to when you think about agent models. But something that's really important about rural women is also the tenacity, the resilience, and the willingness to work. I don't think I've ever met a rural woman who would say कि मुझे कमाई नहीं करनी, right? Women want to earn income. They want to have agency. They want to contribute to their families. They want to invest in their children's education and their daughters' futures. We were just creating an opportunity to make that happen. And I think that became the easy part. Bringing technology was, again, about timing. You know, we've been around for almost 10 years, but our technology was only created 4 years ago simply because rural India didn't have the infrastructure to embrace technology. There weren't smartphones, there wasn't internet connectivity, there wasn't an opportunity design. When that happened, that switch happened, it was our rural women that said, let me tell you how I want this technology to function for me and the work I want to do, which is where the co-creation created an opportunity for us to make this work at scale.
Right. No, Ajaita, I can completely relate to it. If you ask me during the last 6 months, what has been one day which has been like most fulfilling, and I remember that day is the day when I spoke to some of these Sahelis.
Right.
It was just amazing to see the transformation in their lives and how grateful they were for that and how energetic they are to say that, if there is some help coming their way, they're ready to grab it with both hands and like go for it completely. But I'm sure during your experience of over a decade, you must be having a lot more heartwarming stories. Could you share some of them with us?
I'll tell you my favorite story. There's a Saheli named Kalpana who lives in Dholpur. Mm-hmm. And she was a part of the Internet Sathi program that Google had launched a few years ago. Mm-hmm. The program ended. She heard about the Saroj Jeevan Saheli program. And I was in that village that day and she grabbed me and she said, do not pick anyone. I'm the right person for the job. Trust me. And I said, and she said, just whatever the task is, I'm ready to do it. And she goes, plus I know how to use a smartphone because of these skills I have. Don't you want me to collect data and do reporting? Like I was shocked to hear this woman from Dholpur say this. So I told the team, I was like, okay, test her, train her, let's get her started. Within 6 months, she was such a rock star that we decided to invite her to Jaipur. This is 3 years ago or 4 years ago during the Jaipur Literature Festival. Mm-hmm. Because Vasundhara Raje was coming to the Lit Fest and she was the chief minister and Dholpur is their constituent district. So Kalpana said, I have to come. I want to come. So we said, Nikin, kaam karna padega. Like you have to work. So her and 3 other Sahelis were spending the entire day for 3 days non-stop talking about what it means to be a Saheli, talking about solar products and really engaging with the top of the top kind of people at Jaipur Lit Fest. When Vasundhara Raje showed up, they ran through the crowds. They created a circle around Vasundhara so no one can actually come in. They then grabbed my hand, and they pulled me in. They said, and then they started talking to the CM as if, like she was just another Saheli. And they said, we are women of Dholpur. We are your constituents. We deserve your attention. You need to support this woman over here. And they started pointing at me because she's doing amazing work for Rajasthan and you need to know. And it was this amazing moment. Photos were taken. And the next day, Kalpana started crying. So I thought tears of joy. And Kalpana said, मैं क्या करने के लिए आई थी यहाँ पर और वो लोग क्या सोच रहे हैं? I said, what do you mean? So Dholpur women don't tend to travel to Jaipur for respectable work, right? Typically, there's a rumor that women from Dholpur are trafficked or they're going for prostitution. So her brother-in-law refused to believe that she was going for real work and spread this rumor in the village. So throughout those 3 days that she was this rock star Saheli, she was also getting the worst curses and anything possible on her WhatsApp phone. And we literally said, we took the picture of her and Vasundhara, we framed it, and we said, take this home with you. She got home and she was holding that photo on her chati, like this, walking into her village. Her father-in-law and father both grabbed her and started crying. They then took her into the middle of the village and they said, "This is my beti, this is my bindidi. इससे जो करा है तुम लड़कों सपने में नहीं कर सकते," right? Because she was this person in figure. They said, "बेटा, आज तू बता तेरे को क्या चाहिए? जो भी तू चाहती है तुझे दे देंगे." She said, "भाई साहब देखो, बेटी 14 साल की है, इसकी शादी ना करवाएं, इसको कमाई, मैं देखना चाहती हूँ कि इसकी कमाई हो." तो कैसे करेंगे? She said, "मेरे पास पैसे हैं, मैं इसको स्कूल में भरा दूंगी प्राइवेट एजुकेशन के लिए." That was how the Sahelis then launched this entire campaign to save their daughters from getting married at 14. We had 14,000 girls get saved because of Kalpana. That's one of my favorite stories. Yeah.
This is really a keepsake. And it's so very inspiring, I'm sure, for all the people who are listening to you and who are on the edge of saying that whether we should do this social venture or not. I think the peripheral impact of doing these things is so very high, especially at this point in time in India when there is so much support for impact. I am sure they're going to get encouraged. Thank you so much for sharing this, Ajaita. It's really wonderful. Now, coming to a little bit of the commercial aspect of social commerce, right? So social commerce definitely is growing. There is a lot of interest in it. We've seen some players jump into it, a lot of fundraising happening in the sector as well. But that is one side of it, right? The other side of it, there are also naysayers who say that social commerce is good. There is a need for social commerce. You need to reach the products to these people who don't have access but are aspirational and do have income, right? But where is the scale? How will this scale? Because it is so customized, it is so operational heavy. As you very rightly said, I think tech, when you spoke about tech and see the right time for tech, I think there can't be a model without tech, correct? But what do you think about it in terms of the future scope and the ability to scale social commerce?
So let's look at this in our angle of rural social commerce and what we see of rural India today. Mm-hmm. There are 700,000 villages. There are 800 million consumers who are hungry for accessing quality products and services. Even if they only spend 30,000 rupees in a year, you're talking about a trillions of rupee business that is waiting to be unlocked. And there are brands and companies that are watching it that absolutely want to tap this new market channel, but do not, as you rightfully said, want to build the infrastructure. Now, what's exciting, if you look at rural India in terms of infrastructure perspective, it's actually already established, right? Today we have roads, today we have internet connectivity, today we have electrification, but also we have infrastructure that has been designed through Ministry of Rural Development with the self-help groups, right? These women collectives. There's 165 million women that are organized in these collectives where data has been captured on who they are, where the villages have been mapped and the pin codes have been created. Mm-hmm. And these women are connected to families who, again, meet the 800 million customer base. So the scale is achievable if you understand who to partner with to really bring this infrastructure in play. We have recently started working on partnerships with government for this reason, because we know we want to tap that self-help group network, get access to that data, bring it into our platform, and then again, leverage technology differently. And I believe that if we just take the way Frontier Markets operates today, our Hindi as being our core language that we have on our platform today, we can scale to 5 states in less than a year without changing anything and just partnering with that ecosystem. That is over 1 million rural women entrepreneurs covering almost 100 million families. That's big scale, fairly fast. If we wanted to move this into the South or into other areas with different dialects, we can again just switch the language because the infrastructure is already there. But on the customization piece, and I think this to me is always really interesting. When you start understanding the pulse of the rural customer and you start getting true insights, the reality is that most farmers have very similar needs. Most mothers have very similar needs. Most children have very similar needs. So when you start thinking about sectors that you want to introduce in terms of product categories, it's actually not that customized. The volume is so massive that you're able to look at this with a very different lens of innovation. One simple example that I think, Ratna, but I wonder if the audience would benefit from this is when we found that one nugget last year about our rural women farmers who wanted cattle feed for their bhese, but they didn't want to travel 5 kilometers. And we converted our model to a doorstep delivery model of cattle feed. And you know this, in less than 6 months, we sold over 634,000 bags of cattle feed. That's scale, that's volume, that's business, because that product partner made 80 crores. And I think there's a huge opportunity here if we start looking with that lens of where the physical infrastructure already exists and how to leverage it. Where do you look at partnerships to be able to quickly move and maneuver faster? And where does technology then play this incredible role to be able to create efficiencies, leverage data differently, and open market opportunities?
Yeah, I think, especially the rural India of Bharat, if you have to approach it, the approach has to be a slightly more niche and a nuanced approach. Like you said, utilizing the whole self-help group network. So I'm sure, I think social commerce will be very big, because if you have to succeed in India, a lot of companies have till now operated in top 10, top 20 cities. But going beyond that is where the real meat is now.
Yep.
So very, very interesting. Ajaita, you've had a very fast-paced life in terms of entrepreneurship, managing multiple things. How do you balance work and life? In the sense, I'm not actually asking that cliche question which everybody asks a woman entrepreneur or a woman professional: work-life balance. Rather, I would say that quality of life is something which is very important to every person, and I think more so it's got highlighted in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So what is your passion outside of work, or what is something that you do outside of work which really helps you improve quality of life?
So it's hard to say that, because I think my work is my quality of life in itself, because I really love what I do, right? I always say it's about working smart, not working hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also about making sure you're having fun while doing it, because it does take over almost 80% of your life, right? And so for me, you can catch my friends always telling me to stop talking, because I just love it so much, because there's so much nuances and innovation, and there's so much going on in this world that's kind of linked to your ethos of development, and it's the core of who I am. So I think that in itself does give me a lot of joy. But also, I think I love meeting people, right? I love meeting new people, young entrepreneurs, people that are working outside of my country. So the idea of cross exchanges to learn and get to meet people and connect is also a big passion of mine. So I do like going to conferences and stuff for this very reason, because I just love learning new things, or getting a chance to just meet new people and understand their perspectives to the things that I'm thinking about, which again helps me a lot. I'm very close to my family, and my family lives in New York. So I do try to make it a point to try to get to New York at least once every 3 to 6 months, for even if it's 2 weeks, just to be able to be, quality ghar ka khana, and also, really getting a chance to be with my siblings, and we're best friends. And so I think that's really been a big part of what I love. I love singing. I'm a big fan of Bollywood music and Antakshari and all of that. So I do that a lot. My dad and I, whenever we meet, we karaoke. So it's something that, is really, again, soothing. One thing I appreciated about lockdown was that it did force me to slow down. It forced me to, I was able to then make the excuse of not traveling. And the amount of hours that I saved allowed me to then start thinking a lot more about meditation, yoga, and things like that. So I do think that well-being is no longer something that we say we should do. I think now it's so critical to carve that time and actually ensure that even if it is for 20 minutes a day, you are taking that time to do physical well-being for yourself. And I think that's become a really big part of my normal practice, which is helping me be sane.
Yeah, I think going back to your roots, whether it's nature or whether it's your family, I think there is no substitute for that. They completely identify with what you're saying. If not frontier markets, or if not an entrepreneur, what would Ajaita be?
If you ask people, they would probably say politician.
Oh,
that's what people would probably say. Literally all the time, either an American politician or an Indian politician or a global politician. But I'll tell you, I never thought I didn't know that I was going to be an entrepreneur. My ultimate goal actually always was that I wanted to be Secretary of State of America, because I always thought about global diplomacy. And I always thought about, trying to understand where leaders can actually make better decisions. So I always saw myself either at like some UN body or some, World Economic body or something or the other. So I don't think that it's over. I think there's still that future. And then the other area is what I really love, and I'm doing it now, is getting more involved in the investment space. It's something that I always feel like, the voice of the entrepreneur can be better utilized if we co-design innovation and financing. And in the last 10, 20 years, I realize more and more, I get the knack and I understand these perspectives. So I'm excited to design for big and for big scale and look at that. So those are probably the areas, but I guess they're all still thematically in the social space. So I guess I don't escape that.
But it's a very interesting take when you say that I want to be a politician or want to be, somewhere in the bureaucracy, Secretary of State. I think young girls today don't really think about it. But, that can be hugely inspiring to a lot of people who are, in this new day and age when doctors, lawyers, engineers, accountants, those professions are not what you have to do or what you're expected to do. And there are a lot more avenues which open up. And this is a very interesting facet that you brought to us today.
One thing I've learned, which is so interesting, because I mentor a lot of young women, a lot of millennials, especially, who constantly come up with these new business ideas. And it's always fun to see where their head is. But what they said, which I think is so interesting, is they've said that, we didn't grow up with the same rhetoric as you did. We were told we could do anything and be anything. And so, and they're also growing up in a world where, I'm sorry, you can't ignore what's happening around you. You can't ignore climate change. You can't ignore COVID pandemic. You cannot ignore systems racism. And so fundamentally, I think what's so interesting is that I think today, it's like a no-brainer in my perspective. And I always get jealous of this younger group, not to say that I'm that old, but still the younger lot, because they're getting to take their skills of technology, AI, design, and see this world with the lens that's so in front of them that if they don't take the chance, there's a really weird question about value systems and their upbringing that probably should come in.
I can't tell you how much I relate to this, because you said there is a cohort of kids today who are given an open plate to say that, do whatever you want, make a difference. I have a 6-year-old at home, and, if you ask her today what she wants to do, she will tell you without the blink of an eye that I want to become the Prime Minister of India.
Amazing.
And this is not because we've told her that, this is an option for you. In fact, it just was a surprise to us that how did she even think about that? When you ask her, she's like, I really love my country and I wanted to see among the top countries in the world. And that's why I want to become the Prime Minister.
Amazing.
I think, Ajaita, it's been really fantastic talking to you. Just knowing Ajaita as the CEO of Frontier Markets is a different thing. And getting to talk to you today to understand the passion behind creating it is a totally different ballgame altogether. I'm so glad to have done this session with you, and I'm sure for our viewers, it is so very encouraging and enlightening.